Oh, hi, my friends. Great to see you again. Glad to be back with you. I'm just happy as a clam to be here today after a brief hiatus. One of the things I've been doing on these videos of late is trying to explain some of the mysteries that we find in the Bible. Um, I really believe God put me here on this earth to teach people the Bible. And if I can help someone, um, maybe you, with understanding some of these mysteries, I am just glad to do it. And sometimes I run into mysteries. I didn't even know were mysteries until somebody comes and asks. And that's what we have here today. It's one of the parables of Jesus. A few days ago, someone came asking, what does this parable mean anyway? And I was glad to explain it. And when I did, he said, you need to put this on your YouTube video because there are some strange things out there on YouTube being taught about this particular parable of Jesus. You can find it in Luke chapter 19, verses 12 to 27. And I'll tell you what, let me read this and then I'll explain it to you what the Lord is really talking about. All right. Luke chapter 19 begins in verse 12, and it tells us, He said, therefore, a certain nobleman went into a far country to receive for himself a kingdom and to return. And he called his 10 servants and delivered unto them £10 and said unto them, Occupy till I come. But his citizens hated him and sent a messenger after him, saying, We will not have this man to reign over us. And it came to pass that when he was returned, having received the kingdom, then he commanded these servants to be called unto him to whom he had given the money, that he might know how much every man had gained by trading. And then came the first, saying, Lord, thy pound hath gained £10. And he said unto him, Well, thou good servant, because thou hast been faithful in a very little, have thou authority over 10 cities. And the second came, saying, Lord, thy pound hath gained £5. And he said likewise to him, Be thou also over 5 cities. And another came, saying, Lord, behold, here is thy pound, which I have kept laid up in a napkin, for I feared thee, because thou art an austere man, thou takest up that thou layest not down, and reapest that thou didst not sow. And he said unto him, Out of thine own mouth will I judge thee, thou wicked servant. Thou knewest that I was an austere man, taking that I laid it not down, and reaping that I did not sow. Wherefore then gavest not thou my money into the bank, that at my coming I might have required mine own with usury? And he said unto them that stood by, Take from him the pound, and give it to him that hath £10. And they said unto him, Lord, he hath £10. For I say unto you, that unto every one which hath shall be given, and from him that hath not, even that he hath, shall be taken away from him. But those mine enemies, which would not that I should reign over them, bring hither and slay them before me. So let's think about this for a few minutes, all right? When we look at a parable like this, the first thing that we need to do is take a look at the context, and that helps to gain understanding often when we do that. So what is the context? We see here in chapter 19 of Luke, Jesus had just left Jericho. He had been in the ministry in Perea. That's Perea. Perea was on the eastern side of the Jordan River. It's where the country of Jordan is today. The Perean ministry lasted about 4 to 6 weeks. It was not very long. And then Jesus crossed over the Jordan River near Jericho, went through Jericho. Why? Because he's on the way to Jerusalem, and he knows that at the end of that trip, when he arrives there, the cross is waiting for him at Passover. He explained 3 times to his disciples what was going to happen. They didn't understand. And he also gave them some parables like this one. So when we look at this, understanding that the cross is waiting for him, it's about a nobleman. He's going into a far country, and of course, in the first century, it's probably Rome, to receive a kingdom where Caesar would grant him authority over a particular area. He'd be the king in that area, and then return. Well, the nobleman is Jesus. He's the one who's about to leave. He's going to be crucified, raised, and then ascended into heaven after 40 days. He's going to leave, and his disciples are going to be left behind, just like this nobleman, but he is coming back someday to receive the kingdom. There are citizens who will not have him to reign over them. Well, who are they? They're non-believers. Since the nobleman is Christ, there were people who knew him personally, saw his miracles, and didn't believe in him, who would not have him to reign over him, wouldn't accept his authority. And today, just as in the first century, there are people who don't believe in Jesus. They don't accept who he really is. They don't believe he's even coming back. Those are the ones who hate him and will not have him to reign over them. And then there are the servants. Those are disciples left behind. And they're not given money. These 10 servants are given a pound. And I notice modern translations don't even translate the word. They just use the word mina. That's the Greek word that we use here, which doesn't help a whole lot. How many people know what a mina even is? I can tell you it's a unit of weight. A mina is 12 and a half ounces. So if we're talking about gold, the spot price of gold today was about neighborhood of $3,400, and so each servant receives about $40,000 in U.S. terms. So, but we don't receive money. We come to Christ for salvation, do we? What do we receive? Grace. That's what we receive. That's what we're talking about in this parable. We see that rewards are given to those who are faithful, and there was one man who was not faithful, didn't trust this nobleman. Interesting how he describes this nobleman. He's austere. He takes what doesn't belong to him. He's a cheat. Jesus is not like that at all. He always does what's right. His yoke is easy. His burden is light. He's not like this man, but this particular servant was taking the word of those who hated the master, and they say he's austere. So I guess he must be austere, but he's not like that at all. And so his money is taken from him. But what we're talking about here is grace. When someone comes to Christ for salvation, he's given a measure of grace. And one of the principles we see taught in the New Testament is that when a person responds to the grace that's given to him, he's given more grace. And when he responds to that more grace, he's given more grace. It's described multiple times in so many different ways in the Bible. In 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 7, it says, "In faith and utterance and knowledge and in all diligence, and in your love to us, see that you abound in this grace also." Respond to that grace, abound in it. We're told in 2 Corinthians 9:8, God is able to make all grace abound toward you, that ye also, having all sufficiency in all things, may abound to every good work. Paul talks about himself in Ephesians 3:7. He said he was made a minister according to the gift of the grace of God given unto me by the effectual working of power. He says in Ephesians 4:7, "Unto every one of us is given grace according to the measure of the gift of Christ." And that's described in Peter, 1 Peter 5:5 and 6. As one example, it says, "God resisteth the proud, but he giveth grace to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God. He may exalt you in due time." You'll receive more grace through humility. Teaching here is that we receive grace when we believe on Christ for salvation. And when we respond to that grace, like the faithful servants, more grace is given. And he is coming back someday, like this nobleman. Now, the nobleman said, "Slay my enemies before me." Some people may say, "Boy, that doesn't sound like Jesus to me." And that's because we misunderstand sometimes. Jesus is not a two-dimensional cartoon cutout. He's real. And there is more to him than we realize sometimes. In the gospel, we see him pictured in his humiliation, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. But my friends, when he returns, he's not returning in humiliation. He's returning in glory and in victory and in triumph and in great power. We see in Revelation chapter 19:11, it describes his return to this earth to receive his kingdom. It says, "In righteousness he doth judge and make war." He's described as having a sword in his mouth. That's how he returns. Now, Jesus does not fight with anybody. He's God. He simply does. What that means is that when he returns, he just says the word. And for those who would not have him to reign over him, millions of hearts will simply stop beating. And that's when he enters into the kingdom that's described in Revelation chapter 20. When he enters that kingdom, he has no opposition. Only believers will enter that kingdom. Even Satan himself is bound in the bottomless pit for 1,000 years while Jesus rules and reigns over his kingdom. He's coming back someday, and he's coming with rewards for his servants. I hope that includes you. It includes me. And that's what we learn from this parable that he taught us. My friends, he's coming back. Be faithful. Be ready for that day. Hope that includes you, my friend. Think about that today, will you? Be back again very soon.